All right, welcome everyone to our webinar on leveling up with Formative. I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us and learn some new tricks with Formative and how you can apply them to teaching your students in your classroom. Before we begin, this is going to mostly be me demonstrating a lot of features within the platform, but toward the end, I would love for you all to participate. You'll get the opportunity to experience Formative as a student. And so if you want to be following along, doing what I'm doing, or also just being ready to participate, you can go to formative.com and click on login in the upper right-hand corner if you're not already logged in. If you are, that button will say My Dashboard instead, so you can click on that. Once you click the login button, you can select one of our single sign-on options or use your password and email combination. And so while you are doing that, I'm going to just introduce myself a little bit. My name is Aaron Tarbell. I am a senior client success manager here with Formative. And I'm a former teacher myself. I used to teach humanities in middle school. So I taught 4 years in 7th grade and 4 years in 8th grade, kind of combining social studies and ELA. And something I always like to talk about is how I used Formative with my students in my classroom before I started working for Formative. So I made Formative a regular part of my instruction, and I love having opportunities like this to share ways you can use Formative with your students as well, regardless of what content or grade level you teach. All right, some things to know about this webinar. We are recording this session, and we're going to be posting it, as we do with all of our webinars, on our training center page. And so if you need to rewatch this at a different time, maybe it went a little fast and you want to go back and slow things down or take things piece by piece, you can do that at our training center, which is, and I'll put this in the chat, training.formative.com. Although you probably signed up for this webinar through that same website, so you should know. Something else to know, we are scheduled for 30 minutes, so we're trying to make the most of your time. I know how valuable it is. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please put them in the chat, and I will either address them verbally or wait until kind of a stopping point, and we'll get to those questions as well. So we're leveling up with Formative today, seeing how we can take Formative beyond kind of simple, more rote question types. Nothing wrong with kind of multiple choice or multiple selection, but ways we can take our students thinking deeper, ways that we can actually incorporate Formative, not just for assessment, but also for lesson and content delivery, which is actually how I used Formative for the most part in my classroom, more than for the assessment pieces. It was kind of how I delivered lessons. So we're going to talk a little bit about creating rubrics in Formative. A lot of our question types allow for a rubric grading instead of a simple points-based grading. We're going to talk about how you can create those and also how you can reuse them. We are going to look a little bit at embedding content from other websites within a Formative. And at the end, before you kind of take on the role of a student, we're going to talk about how one of our newest features, single question view, is a little bit different and similar to our teacher paced mode as well. So we're going to be diving into those topics. It's actually a lot of information to cover in only the 25 minutes we have remaining. So we are going to go ahead and dive in. So I'm going to open up my Formative account. Actually, let me go to a new Formative. So here we go. I've got a blank Formative here. And what I'm going to do is the first thing I'm going to start with is show you how you can add rubrics to any question type in Formative. So as I mentioned before, you can create rubrics from scratch, and you can also create rubric templates that you can then use whenever you need to add one. And so when you go to add a question, certain question types in Formative are going to come with the option to add a rubric built in. So if you go to our open-ended question types, our audio response, file response, free response, show your work, and video response. These open-ended question types, if you click to add one, we'll go with free response here, you'll see this use rubric toggle right here that you can turn on and off in order to use a rubric. Now, that's not to say our other question types, it's impossible to use rubrics. A little trick is if you select, say you have a graphing question, I'm going to change my question type. I have a graphing question and I'd really like to assess my students using a rubric for this question type. One thing you can do is on any question type in Formative, you can add a show your work box. Add the ability for students to show their work. When you add a show your work box, that automatically updates the question to allow for a rubric. So if I have a question type that I want to use a rubric for, but it doesn't show that use rubric option, make sure you toggle on show your work, and that's going to enable the rubric for you. So let's go back just to save some screen real estate here to the free response. I can turn off show your work now and use the rubric. So I'm going to toggle on use rubric. And what I'll see here is this button that says Untitled Rubric. When I click on this, this is going to allow me to create a rubric from scratch. If this is a rubric that I just want to use one-off, I know I'm never going to need it again, I can just click and edit it. If I'm making a rubric that I think I might want to use over and over for multiple different question types, then I probably want to create a rubric template, something that I can go back to and use over and over. Either way, the creation process looks the same. So we're going to click on this plus new rubric template button, and it's going to take me to the blank rubric page. First thing I want to do to be able to differentiate from the other rubrics that I have saved in my template library is to create a title. So let's say this is a short or free response rubric. All right. And I want to make sure to set my criterion. So what areas am I going to be assessing my students on? So let's say I want to assess them on grammar. I want to assess them on their claim. And I want to assess them on their reasoning. All right, so I have these three areas that I'm going to be assessing my students on. If I click on the plus sign over here, I can start adding levels to my rubric. So what level are my students currently performing at based on the work? You'll notice when I click that to add this level, it gives me the ability to add a title and add a description, just like these other options. And it automatically starts me off at 1 point. If I click to add another level, you'll see it automatically updates it to 2 points, 3 points, and so on. Let's say I actually want to have an option to, if my students don't submit anything or the submission is missing, maybe I want to have a 0 point option. Any of these point values, just like anywhere else in Formative, are editable. So I can change that to 0, 1, 2, and 3. And let's say I want to update my titles here, and I'll just go 1, 2, 3 for simplicity's sake. Now, for my next ones, maybe I know from the beginning I want that 0 points. If I change the point value, and now I click that plus sign, it's automatically going to add 1 point for each level that goes up. So rather than having to manually change all of them, if I just change that first one to 0 and click on the additional levels, I've got my rubric frame kind of built out. And from there, I can just fill in the titles and the descriptions as I need based on the assignment that I want to give my students. So when I'm ready, the rubric is built out. It's got everything I need in it. I can click on the check mark here. But really quickly, if you need to remove a level, you make a mistake, you do have the triple dot menus here, or remove a criterion, and you can adjust back if you need to. So something to note right there, the triple dots will allow you to remove a level or a criterion. So when I click on the check mark, I will see that rubric has now been added to my template library here. So if I want to use that rubric, I just click on the Use button. And I'll notice this button right here has changed name from Untitled to the rubric that I selected. Maybe I selected the wrong template. I can go through my list here. Maybe I want to use the creative writing template, and I'll see the creative writing template there. So you can use any rubric from your template gallery and easily replace them. That's why I always recommend that teachers start with the new rubric template, and then you have it and it's ready to go. If you needed to make any minor tweaks or changes to that particular rubric, let's say for this writing assignment, if I wanted to make tweaks based on this individual assignment, I could do so and just click on the check mark to update that template. And so it's always kind of ready to go for me as I am assigning different formatives and creating different rubrics. So something else, if you have a rubric that you've already used, you didn't make it a template gallery item, but you want to use that rubric again, what you can do, and this was before we added the template gallery, this is kind of an old fix, but when you add a new item, you can grab from your library. So if I click search from existing questions here, in my formatives, if I search on my formatives, this allows me to search through any formative that I have created myself. I can search the keyword, whatever assignment I knew this rubric question was from. I made a bank of rubrics for myself. I can actually select that question with the rubric attached from the library and add it to this formative. And now that rubric is attached already for me. So I see a question, can you make a copy of the rubric and make changes? So you can make, if you're using a rubric and I've attached a rubric to a question, when I click into that, I can make any edits here that I want. I can do anything to it. And if I click the check mark, it updates for me. One thing that we cannot, or you can click copy by using the triple dot menu, and you could, you'll see that it has free response rubric copy, and you can make changes that way. So now I've got the two free response rubrics. One is a copy here. So you can make a copy of a rubric that's in your template gallery, but at the moment, we don't have the ability to copy a rubric that is not in your template gallery. The only way to do that is kind of a workaround that I just showed you, which is grabbing an item from the library. So if you want to use a rubric you've already used that's not in the template library, go into a new question, grab from library, and search through your existing questions. Hopefully we'll make it so you can kind of turn an old rubric into a template. That's one goal we have, but we're not quite there yet. All right. And so toward the end, once we get into practicing and you'll get the opportunity to take a formative as a student, you'll be able to see what that looks like from the student perspective. And I'll also get to show you what it looks like from a grading perspective. But while we're there, if I click on the eyeball icon in the upper right-hand corner here, this gives me the student preview. And I'm actually going to click on this button to open my preview into a separate tab. So if you weren't aware of that feature, that's something I would use constantly as I was designing formatives, is the student preview button so that you can see what your students are going to see. As I'm building it out, I want to know what is it going to look like for my students. So in this tab, I have the student preview, and you'll see under the question number, I can see the point value, which automatically updates based on the rubric that I've built, and I can view the rubric details as a student. So as a student, I can click on that rubric and I can see exactly how I'm going to be evaluated by my teacher by looking at the rubric here. And so again, the point values change based on the full points in the rubric. So if I added, if this went up to 4 points, it would be worth 12 total and so on. So students are able to see how they're going to be evaluated with rubrics. All right. Are there any other questions regarding rubrics before I move on? And if there are, you can throw them in the chat. It's totally fine. I'm going to go ahead and keep us moving along because I want to be mindful of time. I wanted to talk next about embedding content. So we've always had the ability to embed content, but we've recently changed the way our content options work. And you may or may not have noticed this, but any of the red options here now function in the same way that our PDF options always have. So when I click embed, I'm going to get this box right here. I can add an iframe code from any other website or a Google Drive share link. And if you're curious about what any of this means, we also have this little information icon right here that you can click on, and it will offer you more of an explanation, but hopefully we can clear some of this up right now. From another website, if you copy an iframe embed code and paste it here, you'll be able to insert that website and embed it into Formative. What I love about embedding content is it prevents students from having to open up a separate tab, having to open up another browser window. It keeps everything in one place for them. And we've made it now so that you can actually connect questions to that content. So students know they're answering a question about this content. And if you're randomizing, it doesn't separate. It keeps everything together, keeps students in one place, just really prevents students from getting lost. And so if you've never heard of an iframe code, it's not as intimidating as it sounds. A lot of edtech websites and websites in general will give you the ability to copy and paste this code ready to go. So one example that I like to use is this simulation site. If you're a math or science teacher, this is a great simulation site called PhET, where students can interact with the material. And if I want to put that into my Formative, PhET actually has this button right here. And a lot of websites, if they have a share button, chances are they'll have an embed code within that share menu. And so right here, if I hover over this kind of code brackets button, it says embed. I click here and they give me an iframe code. You'll always know it because it starts with that bracket and iframe. So I can copy and paste this. They give me a button to copy it. And I love what PhET does here is they actually give you some advice, which is you can change the width and height of the embedded simulation by changing these attributes within the code. And I'll show you how we can do that. So I've copied this code. I'm going to go back to my Formative, and I'm just going to paste the code into that box. When I do that, it's going to display the content for me from outside of Formative. So it's actually taking the other website, embedding it in Formative, and you're able to fully interact with it. And I can also change these numbers if I want, and it will change the size for me. From there, I can attach questions. If I want to ask my students questions about the content that they're interacting with, I can do that. Now, not every website gives you an iframe code. For example, I'm going to delete that one. I'm going to show you another great website is Padlet. Padlet does have this share menu. So if I click up here and I click share, and I want to embed, the code they're giving me does not have an iframe code. But what I can do is I can copy this URL and use another website like iframe generator, paste it in here, and generate a code for myself. And I'll put this in the chat. So iframe generator, and you can preview it, or you can just copy it and paste it into Formative and see if it works. And so here, I've got this iframe code. It's going to embed the Padlet in there, and you'll see it's fully interactivable. You can interact with it. Students could post onto the Padlet directly from within Formative. So embedding is a great way to introduce content to students and share that content with them. All right. So we've only got 10 minutes left. I want to make sure that we're able to do this. When you are assigning a Formative, and if you have any questions about embedding, please feel free to post them in the chat. But I want to talk a little bit about one of our newest features, which is that displaying one item at a time. Sometimes we'll call it single question view. And so I have right here a formative ready for you all to take. I've assigned it to guest students, but one of the options I chose was this first one. When you're in the assign menu, you'll see you have the option for teacher paced mode. I'm not going to do that right now. What teacher paced mode, it's a wonderful tool. It allows you to control the pace of the lesson. So students will only see one question at a time, but they can't move forward or backward. They have to wait for you to move the entire class forward together, backward, all at the same time. However, if I turn off teacher paced, under my adjust settings menu, I have the option to display each item as a separate page. What this does is instead of seeing every question on the formative all at once, my students are only going to see one question at a time or one content group at a time. So if I had that PhET simulation with 3 questions, that's what they would see only. They wouldn't see anything before or after, but they would have the ability to move between questions, previous and next, at their own pace. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to join this formative as a student. If you could please, let's go here. From your account on your dashboard in the upper right corner, you should see a box that says enter quick code. And if you enter this code XEMCUB, you can join us there. You can also, let me go here and grab this website. So if you go to app.formative.com, if you're not logged in yet, go to app.formative.com/join and enter this code. That will also work. I'm putting it in the chat. XEMCUB. Go ahead and enter that code. You'll be able to start moving through questions. I've got 3 questions for you. 2 kind of basic true or false questions. The third one has a show your work box. Don't worry, I'm not a math teacher, so it's a math question. I'm not assessing your math skills. But go ahead and do that, and I'll be able to show you what rubric looks like for grading purposes. And I've got a question in the chat here. How else can you use the quick code as far as with surveys? If you are working with students, I don't recommend using the quick code. The reason for that is when you assign a formative, we want you to assign it to your classes because your students are registered with their classes, with their emails, and it tracks the data to their account. If you use a quick code, a guest code, it's creating temporary accounts. So you're all signing in here. It's not connected to any sort of record with your email address. So this is great. Yeah, if you're presenting what you're doing like I'm doing right now, if you're presenting to your staff at your school, maybe not everyone's using formative and you want them to get an experience, you can assign to guest students and give people a code. If you're giving a formative to your students, we always recommend using one of your rostered classes. That's a great question though, thank you. All right, so I'm gonna go to my view responses page. I will hide names here. So I've got some folks answering questions, excellent. And we've got one person on question number 3 already. I'll give everyone a few more minutes to get those questions answered. You can see my color coding is changing based on my answer key. And then for number 3, we could see these answers coming in real time. Awesome. And this is a question for which I have assigned a rubric. And so rather than grading based on points, I'm going to be grading based on a rubric. So if I select a student right here, so if you want to see kind of what rubrics look like from a teacher point of view, you can go ahead and take a look at my screen. Don't feel the need to submit or no pressure there. All right. So when I select a student, what I'm going to see here, instead of the classic, like with number 2, if I go here, I see this slider, right? I see my colors based on the grading thresholds that I've set for myself. I can adjust scores that way. This is with any of our normal questions. But when you have a rubric attached, instead of that grading slider, you're going to see the criterion or the criteria here, the total points, and you get boxes for each level. And if I hover over the box, I can see how many points it's worth, and I can see the description that I've said. And all I have to do to score a student based on their response is click, click, click. It automatically does the totaling for me, and I'm able to move on to the next student. I can send them some feedback if I want. They could see how they scored, and they can see the description right there as well. Now, one of the best things about this, especially if you're using a show your work question that maybe is really easy to assess, I can select multiple students at a time by clicking on that bubble next to their name. When I click on those bubbles, I can grade multiple students at one time, and I can even assign the same score to them all at the same time. So especially, like I said, with a show your work, if I can clearly see in the box that they've all done the same thing, I can score that rubric really quickly and easily. And I see in the chat, it's a great option for ELA and social studies for writing. I completely agree. I wish we had rubric functionality when I was teaching, because I definitely, I had a lot of workarounds that I used using show your work and having students self-assess, and it was great. But having actual rubrics built into the site would have been really, really nice. So I'm really excited about this feature. And I love that it's so useful regardless of subject area. And so it can be applied to really any subject area here. So awesome. Grouping students, grading students all at the same time, viewing their responses, and grading with a rubric. So that is what I have for you today. We're making phenomenal time. What I would like to tell you next is, if you have any questions about the features we talked about today, maybe a feature that we didn't talk about that you've noticed is new and you're curious about it, our training center is always available. I've already put that in the chat. If you're curious about one of our new question types, I can see we've got a question about drag and drop. I encourage you, in the question mark icon in the upper right corner of your account, you will be able to find articles, videos about how to use these question types, how to score them and everything, all by searching through our articles. If you need anything more technical, you can also contact our Formative support. There's real people on the other end ready to help you out. And if you would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's training, you can, there's a few ways you can do that. We need you to fill out this form so we know who to send it to. I'm putting it in the chat. There's a tiny URL in the chat. If you click on that, it will open up a survey. If you also want to, you can use your phone, scan the QR code on your screen, and that will allow you to take a survey that lets us send you a certificate of attendance. So if you need that for PD hours or anything like that, we're happy to send that your way. Got some great comments here. Love this more than Pear Deck. Awesome. We love hearing from teachers, good, bad, and different. Like, we want your feedback on especially our new features that we drop out. Just because we drop a feature doesn't mean it's set in stone and finished. We're constantly making updates because our goal is to make your lives as easy as possible. So thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for everything that you do. We certainly appreciate it, and I know your students and their families do as well. I'll put the link in one more time. And so if you are all set, once you've completed that, you can go ahead and sign out, and we thank you. Hope you have a great day.